I knew something was off the moment Mason didn't say good morning. 12 years of him nodding at the doorway, coffee in one hand, that ancient thermos he never washed in the other, and today, nothing. Just walked in, silent, went straight to his terminal like the building wasn't actively trying to erase him one spreadsheet at a time. That's how you know a man's given up, when even his habits stop arguing back. He sat there in that same corner of ops, same 2 monitors, same battered keyboard with the missing F5 key, running system checks on things most of us didn't even understand existed. Vendor heartbeat pings, compliance echo responses, sandbox stress tolerances. Whatever the hell that meant. But it all just worked. Until suddenly, it didn't. Not yet. But soon. You have to understand, before the Langfords turned this place into a buzzword bonfire, Mason was the guy. Not a manager, not a suit, just the guy who made everything click. Never took sick days, never asked for raises. Half the board didn't know his face, but they sure as hell noticed when the system lagged and he wasn't around to whisper some arcane command that fixed it in seconds. Then Tessa Langford showed up. CEO's daughter-in-law, Harvard MBA with a minor in Instagram. She walked into Halvix with this glazed confidence like she already owned the walls. Efficiency, she kept saying. Legacy bloat has to go. And she said it while wearing $900 sneakers and tapping on a MacBook that she didn't even know how to reset. And Mason, he just shrank, not visibly, but I saw it. First, he stopped showing up to Thursday lunches. Then he stopped correcting junior techs when they fumbled protocol. That was his love language, correcting you without making you feel dumb. And now, he just let it slide. Real quick, before this spirals any deeper, if you've made it this far, take 2 seconds to hit that subscribe button and throw a like on the video. Seriously, it means the world to the team, and it's how we keep stories like this coming your way. All right, back to it. See, Tessa didn't understand Halvix's guts. She understood PowerPoints. She understood market optics and headcount ratios and words like synergize. So she started slashing roles. Anything that didn't have a public-facing KPI, gone. Legacy data control, gone. Systems QA, downsized. And Mason, she called him a training expense liability. Like he was some outdated firmware they forgot to uninstall. I was in the room when she said it. We've been reviewing discretionary expenditures, she began, in that syrupy, passive-aggressive voice that meant she already made up her mind. And we noticed recurring charges flagged under, quote, resilience training modules. Care to explain? Mason didn't even look up, just kept typing. Mason? That's when he finally glanced her way. And I'll never forget the way his eyes looked. Not scared, not even mad, just done. Like a man who already knew the building was on fire but decided to finish his coffee before leaving anyway. They're simulations, he said flatly. Stress models, contingency events. She blinked. For who? For the system, he said. For the company. She smiled then. And that's when I knew he was gone. Because when Tessa smiles like that, it means she's about to shoot something between the eyes. Well, I think we can agree they're not exactly billable, right? Let's revisit your performance contract this week. He didn't argue. He just nodded and muttered something about final logs. But here's the thing no one asked that day. What happens when the one guy who knows where every wire connects suddenly stops showing up? When the man who was the emergency plan walks out the door and you're left holding a checklist you don't understand? Because Mason didn't fight to stay. He was already 14 minutes into letting go. The line item that kicked it all off looked harmless enough. Continuity protocol, Tier C node resilience drill. Buried in a budget folder 3 layers deep under systems maintenance. I remember staring at it over lunch, squinting between sips of my overpriced kale smoothie, wondering why the hell someone was spending $300 a month on simulated disruption escalation thresholds. It read like Mason had written it just to piss off future auditors. I flagged it anyway. Not because I wanted to make an example of him. Well, okay, maybe I did a little, but mostly because I needed an early win. When you walk into a legacy-drenched company like Halvix as the CEO's daughter-in-law, everyone assumes you slept your way into the job. So yeah, I was gunning for optics. Something public, quiet, low enough not to spook the board, but just loud enough to make middle management think twice about hiding skeletons in budget closets. That's where Mason came in, or rather, didn't. He never attended the team offsites, never commented on quarterly reviews. His expense reports came in 3 days early, formatted perfectly, with no fluff. The man was a ghost, which made him perfect for target practice. Who'd defend the guy no one even eats with? I scheduled what legal politely called a performance correction session, corporate code for we've already decided this is just theater. The day before, I got an unexpected ping from Elise, the assistant who worked 3 floors below in that dusty auxiliary office by the broken vending machine. She and Mason shared a wall, apparently. I'd forgotten she existed. Her message was short. Hey, just FYI, those training modules you flagged, they're not fluff. He's been building those since the ransomware scare in 2016. Saved us during the Sydney breach last year. I thought you should know. I stared at it a good 10 seconds, then closed it. Because here's the thing. Nobody ever told me that. Not IT, not security, and certainly not Mason. If it was so damn important, why wasn't it in the central systems log? Why didn't anyone from the board mention it during transition? Why was I only hearing about it from someone whose desk was literally propped up with printer paper? The next morning, I walked into that glass-walled conference room feeling clean, confident. Like this would be a textbook maneuver. Flag spending, deliver feedback, lockout access by noon, let legal mop it up by EOD. He showed up 5 minutes early. Didn't sit. Just stood there with his badge already out like he knew exactly what this was. HR flanked me, nervous as hell, clutching their little binder of best practices for adverse events, like it could shield them from whatever was about to happen. Mason, I began, we've been reviewing discretionary expenditures, and there are a few items under your profile that raise compliance questions. Things like node resilience drills, which don't appear in any approved vendor directory. He didn't flinch. I'll be honest with you, I said, keeping my tone neutral and professional, the way they teach in crisis modules. We're in a period of rapid optimization. Legacy structures, untracked simulations, decentralized processes, they don't reflect where Halvix is going. He placed the badge on the table with this surgical finality, like it was a chess piece and the move had already been made. You've got 14 minutes, he said. I laughed. Not dramatically, just a scoff, like I thought maybe he was trying to be clever. Excuse me? Before your primary system loses continuity, he said. That's how long the trigger cycle takes. HR shifted in their seats. I don't remember what I said after that. I think I just waved him off and said we'd be in touch. But when I walked back to my office and tried to open the asset forecast dashboard, it froze, not crashed, not errored, just stuck. Like the system itself was holding its breath. And somewhere in the building, I swear, I heard Elise's printer groan to life, like it had been waiting for this moment all along. The room was too clean. Everything in it felt artificial, like someone had Googled corporate professionalism and built a set. Glossy table, water bottles with branded labels, a little bowl of peppermints no one ever touched. I adjusted the cuffs of my blazer twice, smoothed the folder in front of me once, and waited. I knew Mason would be early. That was part of his ritual. Arrive before the room does, watch it settle. He came in without knocking, nodding once at the HR rep, Kelsey, poor girl, already sweating through her blouse, and sat down across from me like we were about to discuss the weather. No papers, no laptop, just him, the badge in his hand and that face carved out of exhaustion and unbothered calm. I hated that about him, how nothing ever cracked through, not even now. Mason, I began, keeping my voice level. This is a formal notice of termination, effective immediately. He didn't blink. We've concluded our internal review and found ongoing expenditures without proper billing trails or documented value outcomes. Legal has confirmed we are within bounds to sever your contract without penalty. Still nothing. We appreciate your contributions to Halvix and... He slid the badge across the table. Not tossed, not dropped. Slid, like a move on a chessboard. Then he leaned forward, not enough to be aggressive, but just enough to make me freeze mid-sentence. You've got 14 minutes, he said. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do. It came out sharp, a little too loud. Before what? My email shuts off? He looked at me the way you look at someone who just tripped over their own ego. Not pity, not contempt, just knowing. Before the primary job shuts down, he repeated, then leaned back, lacing his fingers like this was just another Tuesday. Kelsey shifted in her seat, glancing at me, then at him, then at the floor. The silence stretched so tight I thought something in the ceiling might snap. Is that some kind of threat? I asked, voice cooler now, measured. No, he said. It's a protocol. That's when I felt the tiniest prickle of sweat under my collar. Not because I believed him, because a part of me did. Because Mason wasn't the kind of man who talked unless something already happened. I cleared my throat and motioned to Kelsey. Can we proceed with the offboarding checklist? She nodded too quickly, flipping through her binder like it might shield her from his words. I didn't look at him again. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction. He said nothing else. Just stood, straightened his shirt, and walked out of that glass box like he'd just closed the last chapter of a book no one knew he was writing. The moment the door clicked shut, I exhaled. Not relief, just the need to breathe again. Do you think he meant it? Kelsey whispered. I forced a smile. He's just being dramatic. Let's get his access pulled and call IT. But in the seconds that followed, before I'd even opened my laptop, I noticed something. My task queue, frozen, Slack, looping, and then a quiet ping from an internal node I didn't recognize. Training node, instructor handoff initiated. I stared at it, confused. Hovered my mouse over the notification. It disappeared. And somewhere down the hall, I swear I heard the lights flicker. Just once. Brief, like a breath held too long. 14 minutes, and I had no idea what clock we were on. I strutted back to my desk like I'd just pulled a splinter from Halvix's heel. The hallway looked clearer without Mason in it. I half expected a standing ovation from the analytics team, or at least a grateful glance from someone in legal. Instead, they kept their heads down, pretending not to notice. Cowards. I opened my laptop and pinged legal. Drake terminated. Initiate formal lockout. Then a second message to IT. Reassign his credentials to contractor Jenkins. Prioritize continuity. Easy. Clean. Done. My inbox was already filling with congratulations masked as questions. People sniffing the blood in the water. Any word on who's next? Heard about Mason. Bold move. Was he really hoarding that much budget solo? I replied with emojis and vague answers, letting the image form on its own. Let them think I was trimming the fat. Halvix needed a hero. Why not let it be me? An hour in, I leaned back and smiled as Jenkins messaged me, trying to access his continuity archive but getting endpoint errors. Trying again. I replied, it's legacy bloat. Skip it if needed. Because of course it was. Mason's files were always 3 layers too deep, documented like he thought he'd live forever. But then a second message came from the infrastructure team. Receiving sandbox feedback loops. Simulation flags triggering in node clusters. Looks like something's running? I blinked. Running what? No answer. By the time I reached out directly, our procurement queue had stalled. Not paused. Vanished. Like someone had unplugged the faucet from the pipe. First, I got a message from distribution EMEA. Vendor auth failed for Q3 materials. Retry attempt bounced. License key invalid. Then LATAM. Auto-renew contract wiped. Can't reach VendorNet at all. Are we under audit? I called Jenkins. What the hell is happening with the continuity handoff? He sounded sheepish. It's weird. There's something running behind the master shell. Doesn't show up in the script index, but it keeps reinitiating anytime we touch the system. Kill it. I've tried. It respawns, like it's mirrored. I stared at my screen, heart thudding a little faster. Clicked open Mason's last expenditure file, Tier C Resilience Protocol, and hovered over the attached archive. Inside it, folders named Node, Bot6B, Node, .9f, Node, X1, no documentation, no edit logs. Just a string of silent running times, all time-stamped within the last hour. Are these simulations? I asked Jenkins. That's what I thought, but the system's not logging them in simulation mode. It's acting like they're live events. Live. I muted the call and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. 14 minutes. No, it had been over an hour by now, and still the systems weren't failing all at once. That would have been obvious. Clean. No, this was different. They were decaying, flickering node by node like lights in an old hotel. Still on, technically, but dimming, one by one. I reopened the HR transcript from Mason's departure. You've got 14 minutes before the primary job shuts down. What job? What primary? I hadn't asked, because I'd assumed I was the one in charge, and now the building was silent in all the wrong ways. By mid-afternoon, the office didn't feel like an office anymore. It felt like a pressure cooker with all the alarms disabled. No one was talking, just whispering behind screens and tapping nervously like keystrokes could stop a flood. I'd swapped my heels for flats, ditched my blazer, and was now double-fisting iced coffee like caffeine could plug whatever hole was growing in our infrastructure. Procurement North America went dark first, not offline, just unreadable. Their queue server started bouncing back vendor requests with cryptic flags. Auth, ref, null, node 6B missing. I stormed into the infrastructure pit and barked, "Who the hell is node 6B?" No one answered. Then Jake, one of the older engineers with a posture like a turtle, spoke up, not looking at me. It's a legacy access environment, old as hell. We found call traces in the error logs. Keeps showing up when the system tries to verify continuity thresholds. So kill it. We can't. It's not responding to input, and we don't know where it's hosted. Don't know? Isn't this our system? It was, he muttered, still not meeting my eyes. Until Mason split the continuity nodes. I blinked. Split? He finally turned to face me. He decoupled the main system 6 years ago, said it was for security redundancy, set up mirrored triggers for simulations in case of breach. Back then, we thought it was overkill. And now? And now the mirrors are real. He pulled up a terminal and showed me what he meant. One screen showed our central dashboard, gray, sluggish, barely limping along. The other showed an internal feedback loop marked 6B resilience tier active. No controls, just runtime logs updating every few seconds like a pulse. What does it do? I asked, voice cracking more than I liked. It's verifying procedural readiness, but it's not resetting any values. It's treating every request like an anomaly and locking it out. If I had to guess, Jake trailed off. If you had to guess. It thinks we're under attack, internally. Another terminal behind me pinged with an update. Vendor license authentication failure, Q4 procurement rejected. ASA pack, backup request sent, response, node expired. Initiator, node J6B. That's when I felt it. Not fear, dread. That bone-deep sense you've opened a door you can't close. My earlier bravado cracked like a cheap manicure. I remembered the compliance report I'd marked non-essential. It had flagged irregular triggers firing at odd hours, resilience drills that ran while the office slept. I'd labeled it budget obfuscation, wrote fraudulent training overlays in red pen across the header before sending it to legal. Probably felt smart doing it. But now? Now those same overlays were controlling everything we didn't understand. We tried rerouting contracts. No dice. Regional warehouses were locked out of inventory. Auto renewals failed without flags. Every 5 minutes, someone from another department would pop into my office, panic buried under spreadsheets and sweat. Should we pause international orders? We can't, I snapped. We don't control the triggers. Jake pulled up a dependency map. It looked like a spider web set on fire, glowing red nodes collapsing into black voids. At the center? Node 6B. I stared at it like it owed me a damn explanation. What the hell did he build? I asked. Jake didn't answer, but someone else behind me whispered, a real simulation. And that's when I realized we weren't in a crisis. We were in a test. One we were failing. One Mason had designed. Not to punish us, to prove a point. But the only person who understood the answers had just walked out, and he wasn't coming back. Hour 3 hit like a slow-motion car crash. The EU office pinged us on every channel, Slack, email, even a direct call to my cell. Procurement was frozen. Every vendor in their network was hitting invalid auth errors. Contracts were evaporating mid-execution, not canceled, vanished. Vanished like someone had scrubbed our signature off the back end while whistling. Our distribution's paralyzed, their ops lead shouted over the call. We have trucks idling at docks. What's going on over there? I lied. Of course I lied. Temporary node instability, containment in progress. But even as I said it, the board was dialing in. Emergency call, red priority, no agenda. Just a room full of muted screens and pulsing tension. The CEO, Richard Langford, joined from his lakeside estate, looking annoyed that I'd pulled him away from whatever Pinot-fueled retreat he'd been enjoying. Talk, he snapped. I swallowed. There's been an unexpected system disruption tied to legacy infrastructure. We're addressing it, but what the hell does that mean? He barked. Why are we getting vendor escalations from 3 continents? Legal's telling me our contractual autolocks are triggering. Jake from infrastructure tried to chime in. Sir, we believe a dormant continuity node, Node 6B, has activated a self-validating lockdown protocol. It's treating normal operations as anomalies. English, please. Jake looked at me, silently begging to be thrown under the bus. I didn't. It's Mason, I said, voice tight. This is fallout from his unapproved simulations. Richard leaned forward, eyebrows narrowing. You're telling me we gave one man enough access to kill procurement? No, I said. I'm telling you he abused access he never should have had. He built systems outside normal protocol and funneled spend into fake training exercises. Someone, an outside director, I think, cut in, then call him, reverse the trigger. I laughed. I actually laughed. He was let go today. He made it very clear we've got 14 minutes before the primary job fails. That clock's been ticking. So call him. I looked around the room of virtual faces. Absolutely not. We don't negotiate with bad actors. He exploited our funds. Did he? A voice asked. It was Linda Park, one of the legal officers. She didn't look angry. She looked curious. I've been reviewing his file, she said slowly. All of it. Expense logs, protocol notes, even the flagged fraudulent entries you routed through compliance. And they're not fake. That silenced the room. Every expense was tied to a functioning module. Every tool license has documentation. The training wasn't just theory, it was mirrored simulations built into our recovery architecture. There are internal emails going back 6 years. No one ever denied it. They just didn't read it. She pulled up one of the invoices. Resilience drill, Tier B, Node 6B sync test. Outcome, simulation passed. Failsafe verified. License, verified. Mine vendor access. Tier, isolated. Richard looked like someone had poured cold soup into his $800 loafers. You're telling me he documented all this? He asked. Yes, and filed it quarterly. You signed one of the audits in 2019. I felt the flush rise up my neck. The sweat under my collar turned sharp. Then why didn't anyone flag it sooner? I asked. Linda stared at me like the answer should have been obvious. Because it didn't break anything until you removed him. The call went quiet. Then someone muted themselves. Then another. Jake typed something into his terminal, hands trembling. I saw a log flicker across his screen. Node 6B escalation threshold reached. Re-authentication locked. User Mason, Drake not found. Override request, denied. I clenched my fists under the desk, nails digging into my palm. This wasn't just a system glitch. It was a design, a message, a mirror I never meant to look into. And on the other side of that mirror, the man I'd fired wasn't taking revenge. He was just watching protocol run itself. And we were the test case. The sun dipped behind the glass towers across from us, turning the windows into mirrors. We'd spent the last 5 hours staring at dashboards that looked like cardiac monitors mid-heart attack, flat lines, spikes, error chimes that felt more like countdown bells. And still, not a word from him. At 5:47 p.m., a junior engineer named Leon, barely out of his onboarding phase, took a chance. He'd worked under Mason once on a weekend disaster recovery drill, the kind no one showed up to except the people who actually gave a damn. Leon pinged Mason from his personal phone using an old messaging app. Not Slack, not email, just one line. Is it reversible? No reply. That silence hit harder than if he'd said no, because it meant he was watching, reading, choosing not to engage. Legal had already pulled his personnel file, hoping for some clause, some buried admission of fault we could twist into leverage. But instead, they found glowing peer reviews, archived architecture notes signed by compliance, and a chain of receipts that painted a picture I didn't want to look at. A man who didn't just hold the system together, he was the system. At 6:12 p.m., IT flagged something unusual. A heartbeat ping from a forgotten terminal in the DC office. Basement level. Static IP tagged only as training node. Instructor level. Auth lock. Deep fuse. They tried to access it remotely. Failed. Tried again. No good. The system rejected every credential. Not invalid. Unauthorized. Who has the password? I asked, heart thudding in my throat. Silence. Jake from infrastructure looked down at his keyboard. That terminal was Mason's. He brought it in himself during the 2017 resilience redesign, said it had to be air-gapped. We thought it was part of the drill suite. Didn't touch it. You're telling me it's still active? Yes. And no one? Jake just shook his head. No one dared. The room went cold. Not physically, just the kind of cold where panic becomes grief. We weren't locked out because of an attack. We were locked out because we never understood the locks in the first place. I started to unravel then. I felt it, how the tension clawed its way up my spine and coiled around my jaw. Every underling in the room became a suspect. Why didn't anyone review this? I snapped at legal. You told us it was fraudulent, someone muttered. And IT? Why didn't you flag the access dependencies sooner? You approved the Jenkins transition, Jake replied, too tired to sound bitter. God damn it, I hissed, slamming my hand on the table. We need a fix. Can we bribe him? Offer him something? A rehire clause? A back pay package? Something? Legal looked hesitant. Technically, we could draft a reinstatement proposal, but if he won't reply to Leon, I doubt he'll negotiate. What if I call? No one responded. They didn't need to. Everyone knew he wouldn't answer me, because this wasn't about getting even. It was about showing us the system without him, and it was bleeding out in front of us, one locked node at a time. At 7:09 p.m., legal sent one final outreach, not through channels, not through any formal notice, just a quiet message from a personal inbox written by Linda herself. 4 words in the subject line. Would you reconsider helping? She kept the body respectful. No demands, no assumptions. Just an acknowledgement of what we finally understood. We had lost control the moment we assumed we had it. No response. But 20 minutes later, an attachment appeared in her inbox. No message, no greeting, just a single file named last simulation complete.pdf. Inside, node 6B, cycle duration 42351 authentication. Failure count 19 override. Attempted, yes, override blocked. Yes, simulation complete, 100% instructor log out registered. There were no threats, no boasts, just a receipt. A quiet record that the thing we had mocked, misfiled, and stripped from payroll had finished its work. And it hadn't crashed us. It had measured us. At 7:51 p.m., the board convened on an emergency call. No press, no minutes, just a screen full of gray-haired executives and tired directors blinking under the glow of their home offices. No one spoke for the first 60 seconds. Then someone cleared their throat. Systems are coming back online. That was Jake. He had switched to speakerphone, headset discarded like a priest leaving the altar. Not all of them, he clarified, only certain modules. Regional access controls are repopulating. Vendor queues are re-authenticating in Asia-Pacific and parts of Central Europe. But procurement North America is still locked. Anything tied to secondary redundancies is offline unless it passed simulation thresholds. Richard Langford, our CEO, didn't say a word. I watched him lean back in his chair, hands over his mouth, eyes flicking away across the screen like he was trying to find someone to blame, but couldn't, because the only person who'd built the walls now stood outside them. I stared at the table. Nothing burned, nothing exploded. There was no PR disaster, yet. But something deeper had broken. A trust in the systems we'd all treated like permanent scaffolding. And it had taken one quiet man and 4 hours of silence to show us how fragile our scaffolding really was. Jake brought up the final server log. Node reset order, controlled sequence, initiated status, partial restoration, approved functions. Only final command. Timestamp, 1943-11 EST user, instructor. The one title no one else at Halvix had. Someone asked if we should issue a statement. Someone else asked if we should begin a forensic review. A third person, some director from the Swiss office I'd never met, simply said, "Don't spin this, just fix what we can, and maybe learn something." For once, I didn't disagree. I didn't speak either, because what do you say when a man doesn't burn the house down, but just turns off the lights you never realized he controlled? The dashboard in front of me flickered. Our regional order system reconnected. Not all of it, just the essentials. And in the quiet hum of partial restoration, I finally understood. He hadn't left us broken. He'd left us exposed. The dashboard lit up one last time, just a soft, green pulse across the screen, like a heartbeat calming down after a long sprint. Mason sat still, one hand gently stirring the tea he'd forgotten to sip. Chamomile, maybe. Something unbothered. The kind of tea you drink when the world outside your apartment is collapsing, but your peace doesn't answer to it anymore. The apartment was quiet, not staged quiet, real quiet. No TV, no music, just the tick of the old analog clock he'd salvaged from Halvix's engineering wing before they remodeled it into a snack bar. Same clock that used to hang behind him during every late-night simulation. The only witness to a decade's worth of foresight no one ever noticed until it was too late. The screen showed a slow cascade of system logs. Regions restoring, functions reconnecting. But only the ones he'd built to stand on their own. No more, no less, like letting a flood drain into only the rooms worth saving. He reached for a small external drive. No label, just black plastic and a worn sticker peeling at the edge. Plugged it in. Watched the folder labeled Instructor Access Master appear for a second, then vanish as he hit delete. No prompts, no warning, no trace, just gone. The lights on the dashboard dimmed. Then the whole screen went black. He didn't sigh, didn't toast himself. Just lifted the tea, finally took a sip, and closed the laptop with one hand like he was closing a chapter only he ever read. A soft ping lit his phone. Unknown sender. We heard what happened. Quiet genius, they said. Want to chat? He stared at it a moment, thumb hovering, then smiled. Not smug, not proud, just finished. He typed nothing back, just leaned back in the chair, let the silence settle again. And, almost to himself, with no one around to hear it, he said quietly, "Tell her it wasn't personal, just protocol."